Welcome in, everyone, to the PHNX Rising podcast. We are coming to you live from Studio K, presented by Circle K. Make sure to go in and get that 79-cent pull of pop at all participating locations throughout the valley. I am Max Simpson, and I'm joined by my friendly Welsh friend, Mr. Owain Evans. How we doing, buddy?
You doing okay, Max? Like, are you okay?
I've been crunching numbers into a website for the last 2 hours. I'm doing great.
I think we've broken Max.
I don't even think that was you this time.
I think Max is
just broken.
Damon, producer Damon here. We're gonna have to rope producer Damon in here for a second.
Oh no!
Have we broken Max
I don't
finally?
think this was you though.
That was an odd one from Max to start for sure. But the guy's just passionate. He loves Phoenix Rising. He loves Circle K. He loves Studio K. It's just what his life is about at this point.
It's within me. And I mean the polar pops, baby. Let's go, Jet, in the chat.
Okay, Max?
Victory
Are you
Monday.
okay?
Let's go. What?
Are you
doing
okay?
Great. Yeah.
He's doing okay.
We're doing great. Yes. Appreciate Jet in the chat. Everyone hit that like button. We got a lot to talk about. Yes, it is a Victory Monday, which is nice, especially considering, well, it's always an odd one when we have yet another Friday match day, which, of course, as you guys know, that's why you're here. Messes up our schedule, or should I say alters our schedule. That's why we're coming to you Monday, Wednesday, this week.
Oh, yeah. I love those.
We do what we do.
I love those East Coast
really
trips
makes it fun
on
for
a
you
Friday.
travel-wise, doesn't it?
Oh, so we got a show on Wednesday, and I will be bringing my suitcase here and going to the airport after the show on Wednesday. I love a good 11 p.m. flight out of Sky Harbor. It's great.
Oh, don't you ever.
Oh, yes.
Oh, boy. Well, yes. Well, we got a lot to talk through today. Of course, going to be breaking down for you guys a little bit further. Phoenix Rising's 2-0 victory against El Paso Locomotive. And then, talking through just some other happenings in the club. Going from there. Well, Jen in the chat, Max's Reno is almost back in USL. I did share Owen that, and the look on his face was priceless. Is his nightmare that you can't keep.
It's
him
not
down.
Really a nightmare, to be fair.
No, it's fair.
I mean, it's. Oh, we're gonna get into the tier rankings of where Reno sits in terms of just a place.
Oh gosh. We can.
I mean, it wasn't great. I won't lie. There are worse.
That's fair.
There are worse places to go and watch football in this country, but I wouldn't say that Reno was some bucket list experience, to be perfectly frank.
That's understandable.
I mean, it just kind of gave off the vibes of imagine if Vegas was worse. When you stayed in that central area there.
I wouldn't say worse. I think it's
I don't know. Just that
down.
one street with all the casinos was just a bit.
Okay, that's fair.
Bit trash.
It's definitely a little toned down, but anyway, that's a discussion for another day. I mean, let's talk a bit further, right, about Friday's victory, 2-0 again over El Paso.
Reno, by the way. So if you ask New Mexico or Reno, it's not going to be New Mexico. It's not going to be Albuquerque.
Oh dear gosh. Yes, talking about actually, where's El Paso fit in the mix?
No, El Paso's better.
That's fair. So, yes, talking about 2-0 victory again over El Paso. Our initial reaction was, okay, the boys picked it up. First half was kind of dull. Second half grew into the game a bit further. Was overall a comprehensive victory. I think at least based on, there was zero El Paso threat really at any point. That speaks to, yes, a solid defensive performance, but also just the lack of threat that El Paso provided. And again, there are two, we were talking about this earlier before we started. Two things can be, you can have two things be the same thing, right? It was a quality victory in the sense of you kind of helped to curb a bit of the cloud that was kind of hanging over the club.
Well, that's what we put on the thumbnail. You have to snap the skid, right?
Exactly. Yeah, so spirits were raised a bit. Guys, stood up to a performance. There was a lot riding on this match of, listen, you can't go and drop points at home against the worst team in the league. So that was good. Yet at the same time, we have to keep it real. This was the worst team in the league, and this isn't like, oh, they're kind of a fluke. It's not like maybe a San Antonio where, yeah, they're like kind of off, but they have talent. It's like, no, they're bad. This is a bad El Paso team, and they did what they needed to, but they did what they needed to.
Right, and that's the thing. Again, you play a bad El Paso team, and you expect a minimum. I think you're going to win. Probably win by a couple of goals at home. You should do. This, again, if El Paso is sitting at the bottom of the Western Conference right now, this is just the bare minimum in terms of you win that game at home. If you think that you're going to be anywhere near the playoffs, okay, it was fine. It did what it did. There were some players who I think had some pretty decent performances in there, and there are some positive signs that you take looking ahead. But at the same time, you can't get carried away.
No.
This is, again, Rising has another game against Hartford, who aren't doing very well out in the Eastern Conference. Maybe from there you start to build a bit of momentum. Between two games against some of the weaker teams, maybe that helps you when it comes around to more difficult opponents that are coming up in the future. And yeah, you have to get this result, so they met expectations. But it isn't necessarily a sign that things are turning around, per se. I feel as though, again, I've seen a lot of comments that people bring up things like, good seeing the boys enjoying football again. I mean, again,
Sure.
winning has a lot to do with that.
Sure.
I don't necessarily think that throughout the game overall, they were necessarily substantially better than we've seen in some other games where they didn't come away with the results.
Yeah.
But the difference, again, is that when you are playing weaker opponents, you're going to look better. Even if you're coming out and looking relatively similarly, it looks better. The outputs are going to be better. And they do have some good moments there in terms of things they were able to do.
Absolutely. Again, we said it, during post game. We said it, last week leading up to it. You can only play who's in front of you.
Yeah.
And again, that's kind of the give and take of playing a very poor team. If you win, it was expected. If you lose, you're going to get vilified, right? It's the same kind of dichotomy if you're playing one of the best teams in the league. It kind of just comes with the territory. I mean, I think the thing, right, and to your point, is it's kind of hard to maybe evaluate a performance like this, barring some sort of, 4-0, 5-0 thrashing, which we have seen Rising done even as recently as last season.
Yep.
Any momentum at this point, even if it's not a permanent fix, which we are not believing it necessarily will be, it does help, especially getting out of, I wouldn't even call this necessarily a rut. I just call this team was at a low point before this match. They're trying to just dig themselves up a bit.
Yeah, they are. But again, it's small steps. This team is over halfway into the season. They still do sit outside of the playoff positions at the moment, right?
Yep.
They briefly went above that playoff line because of getting the game on Friday when most people were playing on Saturday. But they are outside of the playoff positions.
Yeah.
They do have a game in hand that could get them back in. But again, you're fighting an uphill battle when you're down at that point in the table. It's not easy. It's not easy because, but at the same time, the Western Conference is such a very, very tightly run race right now, with very few points separating teams from the upper spots all the way down to where Rising currently sit, just outside the playoffs, that it's also very doable that you actually make a little bit of a run later in the regular season and you find yourselves maybe not hosting a playoff game. Maybe you could, probably not, but you could find yourself in a position where, much like last season, you end the season somewhere around that 6th, 5th kind of spot. That's possible right now. It's not going to be easy, but it is possible.
It is. I mean, again, you are in a position in the West where it is open. We were saying on post game at the time, and we'll have to do we'll analyze this a bit further when we kind of dive into just what else happened throughout the weekend. But there was a point after Friday's match where they were within 5 points of second or third place. The West is incredibly tight. It is really open for people to take a hold of. And I think this kind of goes back to the balance of listen, Rising came in with aspirations of a top 4 finish to host playoffs. And we said that for all the success that they had in the playoff run, we don't want to take that away. they brought this club brought in a championship. Okay, that is a fact. That is something like we're not going to admonish. We're not going to say, hey, it was a 4-game stretch, whatever. But again, we go back to
you
have. But what I'm kind of feeding into, and yet kind of trying to make the point is, it's the bigger stretch of what this club is all about. You are able to turn it on when it counts, and if it gets you a championship in the fans' eyes in history, I think it makes makes that 2023 club in a way that's going to stand the test of time for this club because they brought home a championship. It's over the longer period of things. Are you trending in the right direction? Because I think is where we bring it back to your point. You want a championship over that 4-game stretch where you played well. Yes, you kind of got in that position by eking out a playoff spot, but that's just it. The margins are so much tighter. And if you are now going into this 2024 playoff picture where you're kind of at the same spot, if you get 6, that's where you were last year. Maybe you're eking out 7th or 8th. It's kind of at the point where we're not trying to jump too far ahead of things. But when I just said in a previous breath that this club, it's tight, the West is wide open, there's a very realistic chance where, like, this club, do they have what it takes to host a playoff match? And that's going to be the thing that you have to figure out.
Well, last season, I think, and here's the thing, Rising won a championship in a rebuilding season.
They did.
We were not expecting Rising to challenge for it last year necessarily. They finished in 6th, ultimately, in the Western Conference. They won their first playoff game, and I think by most people's reckoning at that point, especially when they made it to the conference final, you were kind of in that position of, okay, job done. You've achieved what you needed for this season. You've shown a serious marked improvement over the prior. Anything from that point onwards is a bonus. And they go on and they ultimately lift the title. They lift the trophy. They win the league. But again, it's a process, right? They finish in 6th. You expect then the next season you're building on that. You're going to get better. At the very least, you shouldn't be stagnating or seriously getting worse. They did get worse, I think, over the course of the offseason. And it's understandable that things change when a head coach leaves. True. Especially when they leave in the kind of circumstances that Juan Guerra did. It was close to the start of the new preseason. He left. There was a better opportunity elsewhere for him. And obviously, we all wish him the best in that opportunity. But it's not easy then for a club to work out where it goes from there. At the same time, it's been a very clear, I think, regression from what we saw last season on many levels. And you can't afford to come out of a season where you perhaps overperformed a little bit in a rebuild season and then change things up in such a way that you're actually regressing. And again, that's what we've seen. Now they're making some more changes in this. And I think there were some other bright spots as well. A lot of people are going to say Charlie Dennis, and I understand what they're seeing in him. I think we saw someone who had some really good play between the lines. The eye test. But I tell you what, if you want the stats test, actually, someone else really stood out from that game, and it's not Pape Boye either, who I think had a decent game. It's Renzo Zambrano. Now, Zambrano, did he have his best game from a physical presence kind of perspective? No, he didn't. But he led the team in chances created by a long way. 6. Next highest had 2. 96% passing accuracy, 90% passing accuracy in the final third in creating 6 chances.
6 crosses, too, from his position where he put him in. That's a little bit of variety.
And he gets the assist on the JP Scearce goal. So, again...
And 1 possession 5 times, tied for most on the team.
Yeah. Yep. Again, it's one of those games where you look at him and say, okay, if you can do this regularly, it's going to bring so much to this team. Having the ability to do that will bring so much to this team. But it's about turning that into then a consistent performance. That's what we haven't seen for much of this season, is that consistency from game to game. They will show it in some of these matches, and then you go into the next game and it isn't there. And it's just very, very hard then to kind of piece together how you're going to make that keep going if they can't play consistently. It's hard to piece together how you're going to, especially in a pretty tight race like this is, say with any real certainty, okay, we're going to pick it up. We're going to know how we're going to do it. If you can't find ways to do this consistently. Now, again, Charlie Dennis, interesting acquisition. We've seen, I think, what the team were looking for from him in terms of his impact on play during the second half when he came in as a substitute. But again, the question for Charlie Dennis, because we expected it wouldn't be that much of a learning curve necessarily when you have several teammates that you know that you've played with before. Obviously, other former Oakland Roots players that he has been around in the past. So it's not necessarily the huge learning curve of all of your new teammates there. But we need to see whether the outputs are going to be there instead of just little elements there like the eye test. Are we going to see assists from him? Are we going to see goals? Are we going to see him winning headers? Are we going to see him winning duels? Is he going to do that repeatedly over the course of the remainder of the season? Because he had a promising debut, and if he carries that forward, you'd hope that the outputs follow. But that's the test that's being set for him.
So I don't disagree because, right, cameo was good. What is he going to be doing moving forward in a larger cameo, in a larger role, match by match? I think the thing that's going to be interesting, and you kind of mentioned, right, I know you're throwing out a bunch of different stats to measure, right, but like goals and assists, I think that's something that's going to be very variable because that's also not necessarily relying on him. And I'm not going to belabor the point, but, right, this team needs more pieces in play. I think this is and he showed it on Friday. Charlie Dennis could be a major part in this team. We have already seen, right, Renzo Zambrano. I personally think he's one of the more improved guys on the squad, and he was already a pretty solid player from a defensive aspect last season. He was named vice captain for a reason heading into the start of the season, right? Wore the captain's armband with John Stenberg out, on Friday. And he has really revolutionized just his forward momentum. He has gone considerably better. Yes, those like you said, where he had 6 chances created, led the team. Is that always going to happen? No, but we've been seeing his average match is far better in those chances created in that forward progressive passing than in other parts. If you combine that Renzo Zambrano improvement, which has already been happening, already been seeing it throughout the season, with what Charlie Dennis has to offer, your midfield suddenly has a more dynamic attack to it than what it's had. The question becomes, well, twofold. Number one, how often is Charlie Dennis kind of roaming forward, and where is his position? May be a loaded answer on where that kind of falls. And number two, what is in front of him that's going to help lead to goals and assists? Because if you're just looking for him to be the one-man show, one-man creator, you're going to kind of run into a lot of the same issues that this team has had first half of the season.
Well, yeah, you can't rely on any one person to be the one you run everything through, right? It doesn't work that way. It makes you predictable. It makes it so that players can be marked out of the game. It makes it so that you can find ways to deal with that. But I mean, again, I do actually agree a little bit with Brett there in that the good thing about Dennis is he's not super system specific. He'd be able to play in most all coaches' systems. That I agree with. I think this is someone that there's a few different roles he can play in that team. We know the expectation broadly seems to be that he'll play as either a 10 or an 8. But again, the options are there if you want them to try and work out how you're going to make it work. I think one other thing that was quite interesting to me was JP Scearce's role in the attack. And obviously not necessarily from free-flowing attack per se, but this is a man who got 3 shots off, all from right around the edge of the 6-yard box over the course of the game. One of them's on target, one of them's a goal, and one of them's off target. But if you can keep finding him in those spaces, it does open up opportunities there for you. And knowing how Rising have been with their crossing, knowing how they've struggled with their crossing, it's interesting to see someone who is out there as a recipient and is doing a decent job at getting on the end of crosses.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob Franklin. Oh, what a guy running his mouth.
What are you running your mouth about, Jacob Franklin?
No, he's running his mouth.
No, it says there that you thought you could run your mouth with him on the road.
Jacob ain't
you
nothing.
Run your mouth
Jacob ain't nothing.
Jacob.
Keep on being a keyboard guy. Anyway, go push those buttons.
You just said Jacob ain't nothing.
Go push those buttons, Jacob.
Trouble in paradise before the pickleball tournament coming up on Saturday.
No.
I mean,
teammates. This is how teammates. Just.
I think personally that like Damon should just go on strike now. You're just demeaning his entire job here.
What? No, I'm
you
just meaning
just said
Jacob.
about just go push buttons. Like, I think that's
Just
quite rude.
Jacob. Damon does so
I
much
think
more than
Damon's a very, very important part of this team, as is Jacob.
100%.
Well, I appreciate you, Owen. I want to circle back to the pickleball thing. I mean, I'll tell you what, me and Danielle would never fight like that ever.
Is that
and that's
right?
why we're going to come prepared.
Oh, that's fair. That's good camaraderie on your end. What a guy. Gosh darn it, I totally lost my train of thought. Oh yes. Okay, you're talking about we'll put a bow in this in that. I think the JP goal. I think that process and kind of the buildup and everything. If you really look at where Rising has been the most, not only clinical attacking wise, but the most consistent attacking wise, you've kind of seen it from these match to match aspects where you're having the wingers or a midfielder taking up those half spaces, driving down towards the end line and whipping in, not really a cross, but call it a grounded pass into that 6-yard box. Saw it on Friday. You've seen it in both of Darius Fermella's goals in this brace against Orange County. You've seen it in Remy Cabral's opening goals against Tulsa on the road. When this team is able to utilize the half spaces, which comes from wingbacks pulling the defenders out wide, and you have midfielders attacking forward, which now includes Charlie Dennis, which can include Renzo Zambrano if he's able to take out those spaces. Whether it's a number 9, whether it's a number 10, whether it's someone further back, this system can be designed to open up that space in the 6-yard box. It just depends on if people are making the movement. And once you see that happening, you see a bit of a blueprint where this team is able to make some noise. It's just about finding that more consistently rather than a lot of these whipping crosses in. And listen, you got to do that to keep the defense honest, but you've seen where your most effective attack is. It's in those half spaces.
Yeah.
Well, most effective for me is our friends at Circle K. Friends at Circle K just so effective in helping you quench your thirst. 79-cent Polar Pops and Frosters all throughout the summer. It is hot. We're pushing. And we got temperature updates like 114, 110, somewhere in here. Yeah. And Owen's nodding along.
It's hot.
It's hot.
It is hot.
That's what it is. Yes. Check out our friends at Circle K. They got a nice Polar Pop for you, something to cool you down. 79 cents if you are an Inner Circle member, which...
It's actually apparently going to stay under 110, by the way.
Okay, fair enough. Still hot.
But that's still hot.
Still not hard. It's only under 110. That's such an area. You know you're an Arizonan when. But yes. Phoenician? Yeah. Anyway, check out our friends at Circle K. Again, 69 cents if you're an Inner Circle member. It's a nice deal. It's free to do. Have I mentioned that before? I totally have. And also, they got snacks. Damon, that's your cue. Oh, yeah. So, Damon's going to be... what do we have today on tap? This amuse-bouche.
Wrigley
sour worms. Yes. Okay, yes. We got the snack toss here today. Damon and I have kind of talked about whether this is going to be like, is it going to ball it up? Is it going to be just a dart throw? A little Luke Littler? All right.
He's going with the darts.
Oh, no. I think he's kind of... Oh, no, he's definitely balling it up. Let's worm more squirm. Here we go. Yep.
That's a catch.
That counts.
Let's go. And we're just on that wavelength. We're too darn good. Might replace Jacob at this rate. But check out our friends at Circle K, Inner Circle Program.
Don't talk with your mouth full, Max.
Terms and conditions
rude.
do apply.
They
See
do.
Participating locations for details. Ooh, that is a sugary boy. Tastes delicious. Also, check out our friends at Valley Taproom. Tastes delicious. You know what? Nice ice cold burr. And some wine slushies. All that other...
What did you just say?
Nice cold burr. Nice cold burr with our friends over at Valley
Why?
Taproom.
Why are you talking like
Just
that,
saying,
man?
Our friends at
It's a
Valley
beer.
Taproom have some ice cold...
Get yourself a beer.
Yeah, they got those too. Ice cold burrs, as well as wine slushies, all these different types of things. You can bring your own food. Again, be on the lookout. Valley Taproom. We went to the Gilbert location for the watch party. We're going to be going to their Queen Creek location for some PHNX Rising exclusive meetups and stuff down the road later in this season. So be on the lookout. Again, follow them, Valley Taproom, Gilbert, Queen Creek locations. Find them at valleytaproom.com, on social at Valley Taproom.
Oh, you know what, Max? You know how it's going to be like in the hundreds here for the next several months?
I'm aware.
It's going to be like mid to low 80s on this away trip this weekend. I'm not going to high five you, but it's going to be...
That's kind of rude. Hey, how about Colorado Springs? What's the update? We're going to Colorado Springs in
who's
2
going to
weeks.
Colorado Springs? Who's going? Let us know.
Oh, yeah. Everyone, by the way, in the chat, hit that like button.
Everyone
and
who matters is
if
going
you
to Colorado
hit that like button
Springs.
regardless, and then if you're going to Colorado Springs,
It's going
let
to
us
be
know.
90s and below.
We're getting a convoy.
It's going to be
I know
nice.
Kevin in the chat. He's going to Colorado Springs.
Max, you going to Colorado Springs?
You're darn right. What's the weather? Here with the weather.
Well, we don't have a weather forecast for that one, not coming up yet because it's, like quite a way
They do their
off
jobs.
still.
I'm no meteorologist, but I think they got
You
it.
are no meteorologist, Max.
Why we call them a meteorologist? They're no meteors.
At the moment, it's saying it's going to be like high 80s.
Oh, so you do have something. You're lying to me. So they did have something.
It's quite a way out, though, like it's like 2 weeks away.
It's less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, but it's still a way out, it might change.
Yeah, that's very possible. All right. Well, something that won't change is, listen, that was a nice transition. I
That
know.
was a very weird transition.
Pretty
Max,
good.
knowing what's coming up next?
Pretty good. I'll let you pat me on the back by
I'll
proxy.
pat you on the back.
I just did it for myself. Dear gosh, the chat. You guys are crazy. All right, listen. Something that won't change is there's been some. Well, it's been a couple weeks for this club.
Right.
We've been saying this before, and again, we kind of opened with the show. We kind of said it on post game on Friday. There is a balance between celebrating the wins and also realizing where the season is at. Our job is not to take away joy or to, completely like absolutely this is a hater of the club or anything like that, but it's keeping it real. And I think in a balance of that, well, Owen, I'll pass it off to you.
We're gonna talk about, I think, still the bigger picture, are we?
Sure can.
We did talk about this, of course, on Friday night, right? We went through the fact that ultimately, when you have banners like you had raised before the game, it's gonna draw questions. We've seen the negativity online for weeks now. That negativity has been building up ever since the decision was made to part ways with head coach Danny Stone back after that Memphis 901 loss.
It was a little crescendo, if you will.
It kind of kicked off right that day after. As soon as the news came out that he was gone, you see the negativity start rushing in. And we kind of sat around there waiting and thinking, what's going to happen now? Because we knew 3 weeks away that realistically you were going to be in a position where if the fans wanted to do things, they had the time to make it happen. We were in a position where if the fans were, maybe things blow over a bit, maybe they don't. You're also in a position where maybe the club has made a permanent appointment at that point. Mm-hmm. They didn't do so. You're still in a position now where the club still has an interim head coach at the time being. And so we show up on the match day for El Paso, and the fans did have their protest of sorts. There's a banner hanging at the front for Danny Stone, the former Phoenix Rising head coach, who many of them, I think, weren't happy with the circumstances around his firing. There is a banner up calling for the club president, Bobby Dooley, and the club sporting director, Brandon McCarthy, to go. And there is a smaller banner held up at various times before and after the game calling for Panos to return. Literally just said free Panos. I think the thing that we then see out of all of that is you get the kind of usual responses from the club. The ones where we care about our fans, that we care that they're so passionate, we care that they are, they care so much to do these kind of things. It's something that goes back to when Rick Shantz was the head coach here, okay? And he would say those same things, that the biggest problem is when people don't care. And it's true. It is true. The biggest problem is when people don't care. If they're apathetic towards poor performance, that is the single biggest issue that your club could face. But the problem is that from there on out, it then becomes a question of how do you tie things together in a way that's going to actually satisfy that fan base? How do you actually show the fans that you care? Not just say it, because words and talk are cheap. It's the same when certain people in the club will say that, Bobby Dooley told me after the game that they don't duck from accountability. But again, that isn't being shown visibly. to people outside of the club. And that's kind of where the issue is that if you approach this from a business perspective, you can say, fine, we keep stuff internally, but a football club isn't just a business. And that divide that you're seeing increasingly grow between management and the fan base isn't something that easily works in a business like this. And the reason why is because football clubs aren't just a business. They're a community asset as well. More so, I think, even than other American sporting teams, to be honest. Partly because you've got the comparison to other countries where they are even more of a community asset rather than a business. And so the fans expect that they're not just customers, they're stakeholders in this. You know, if I went out and bought a loaf of bread and it was bad, and I bought the next two and they were bad, I wouldn't buy that same bread again. But if I go out and watch a football team play 3 bad games, I'm still coming back for the 4th game if it's your team. That's what you do.
Damon does every Premier League with supporting Chelsea.
All right, there we go. You get the little dig in at Chelsea. But that's kind of the nature of this, and it's why things like accountability and why things like actually listening to the fans have to actually convince them that you're serious about doing so.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the biggest problem that the club is facing right now is that fans don't feel heard.
Yeah.
They don't feel as though their concerns are being properly listened to. And you'll end up with people in the club saying, well, we are listening, but it doesn't quite come across that way. And it's things that these are things that are only amplified when you, I mean, again, we can go back to Friday night, right? And the banners and the reaction to those banners from certain people in the club. One senior person within the club made a comment to me, a kind of a jibe, about being the supporters correspondent now, since we're posting pictures of all the banners they're putting up. I'm sorry, but I think that when fans bring a 9-foot banner calling for 2 very senior people in the club to go, I think it's worth listening to their reasons. I think it's newsworthy. And I think that that's ultimately how you make fans feel heard, is actually by addressing those things, not by ignoring them. To say that, you know, that's kind of a supporters correspondent as though it's some kind of just dismissive thing that you can put out there to say that, you know, these things don't really matter. I mean, if that's the case, dare I suggest that you go in front of a camera and tell the fans that's what you think. Because ultimately, that isn't reconcilable with the comments about how, well, we do care about the fans. You can't come out with comments like that and dismiss the things that they're saying when they're putting their passion into projects like putting a 9-foot banner up, telling people to go. That's where this club has gotten to. And you can't just dismiss that. You know, you've got to actually try and build those bridges. And is the club doing that right now? I don't publicly see it. And I don't think most of the fans do either. But again, I mean, you look at other comments that have been made over time. One of the owners on Twitter, this was a few weeks ago, we talked about this back then as well. I know that may be hard to see right now, but in this case, we have to live with the divide between our intent and the impact on the SGs. You have to live with that. All the good intentions in the world, you can have them. But when these things are impacting on your fans, you have to actually think about that.
Yeah.
And again, everything is just, well, we care. Oh, we're being accountable. But they don't talk about that. They don't come out and really handle that in front of the fans in a lot of ways. And so I don't think this easily goes away. I mean, again, when people tell you who they are, you listen to them. And when you make jibes like the supporters correspondent one, you're telling people who you are. And you're telling people the prevailing attitudes that exist within the football club. The idea that you can silence people, you know, kind of want to silence people in that way, I just find it bizarre.
Yeah.
again, this is a community that you're trying to build here. You are not just going to make it. You're not going to build something long-term, some long-term project on people who just show up on dollar beer nights and just show up to see a helicopter land. You have to build community around that.
Yeah.
And those kind of dismissive attitudes, I think, lay bare a lot of things about where some of the issues in this club lie and how serious and deep that runs.
Yeah, that's pretty well said, man. I mean, yeah, you know, there's a couple ways to kind of talk, you know, kind of break this down, right? I mean, when you talk about saying supporters correspondent, well, that's first off, what a bar.
It's almost as though a football club isn't just what happens on the pitch.
Yeah.
You guys aren't going out and playing for fun. A football club is every part of that club.
It is.
That's all a critical and integral part of a football club. And I understand Brett's comment here, isn't it? It's sort of a tricky balance to some extent between keeping things internal and being open with everything. And I understand that again. But again, you're at a point where it's very clear that the fan base and certain parts of the fan base are unhappy.
Yeah.
With how things have been carried out. You can't, I mean, there are individual personnel issues, right? I'm the Panos thing, I'll give as the example. I feel as though the answer from Diego, whether it was the kind of answer that we'd ultimately prod for or not from their perspective, probably was one that said too much but not enough. It gave you enough information that you've got many more follow-up questions to it.
And that's all you're going to get.
But you're not going to actually, they're not going to dish out any more answers, nor in some ways necessarily should they willingly dish out answers on things like player discipline that are internal. But obviously once you've put it out there that that's what it's for, it raises further questions. And I think it's so many of those things that throughout this entire process, just a failure to take the fans with you as you go through this process, a failure to let the fans understand why you make decisions, and more just kind of the assumption that they should take it on blind faith that you know what you're doing and will do what's best for the club.
Right.
And at the end of the day, these particular decisions from the club as they've gone through aren't being trusted, I think, by the fan base. The fans also, let's be clear, are not stupid.
Sure.
Okay? You know, sometimes you might see some of these guys out there sinking 5 or 6 beers, especially on a dollar beer night, and you think, all right, they're just out having fun and just partying. But a lot of these people really do care about the football.
Sure.
This is their release on a weekend. It's the day that you look forward to all week. And they're not happy about the direction things are going. I mean, look, if we want to talk even deeper on direction, right now, what does the club stand for? We've had this discussion before, but what does the club stand for right now? Because I don't know how I'd summarize what Phoenix Rising per se is to its community, to its stakeholders, to its fan base. What is this club? Because a lot of clubs have identities, and Phoenix Rising's I still don't fully know. Now, winning was once an identity, but that's not sustainable. You can't guarantee winning all the time. Mm-hmm. And I think over the past few years, winning hasn't been the identity. Even with the championship, again, they were not a club that really, shone through the regular season that make you think, okay, this is a real heavy hitter in this league. They had their moments, and they were always going to be a team, I think, that when you got to the playoffs, no one really wanted to face, because you knew that they could pull off an upset on their day, and they did. They did. That's how they got to the title.
Yep.
They performed very well in some difficult games on the road over a 4-game stretch. That's how they got to a title. But beyond that, I still struggle with what Phoenix Rising now is.
Right.
Last season, we saw more of an effort, I think, under particularly Juan Guerra as head coach got it and really wanted to push the idea of we are all together.
Yeah. And that's beyond football on the pitch.
It was. A lot of it was about
effort.
This idea of the fans as such a huge part of it. And he said it, and it always came across genuinely And I think a lot of his actions over time did also back that up.
And I think that's the part about that that's worth mentioning is you talk to the man every post game. This is after the best of victories and the worst of defeats. It was a credo. It was a defining beat after everything. We are in this together through the thick and thin. And people could say that, but it's also very easy to say when things are going well. It's not as much when Rising last year. They're in the thick of it.
There were times when there were some really poor runs last season. There were some really difficult moments. I mean, here's the thing, right? I'll address 2 comments in here. Brett George saying playing devil's advocate, even if the FO wanted to give more information, who would do it that the fans at large would believe? Well, that's a serious problem. Okay, that's a serious perception problem. And the question really then becomes a question of, I think, competency within the front office. How have you gotten to a point whereby there's no one there that you think the fans, by and large, will believe? And more importantly, doesn't that raise questions of how you move forward from here? Because moments happen where you need people in the front office to be trusted. You need them to stand up and be believed by the fan base. That's going to happen no matter what happens down the line, okay? The club, there are many things that aren't the front office's fault that will require moments like that. I'll give you a perfect example. In 2020, you can't say it was the front office's fault that Junior Flemings did what he did in San Diego. But in the following ensuing weeks, you have to take it seriously. You have to understand that the front office is taking this seriously, that the club is taking its responsibilities seriously. It's not their fault that they got there, but they have to be taken seriously thereafter.
Yep.
And the problem now, you say, is, well, if people don't take them seriously, you think, by and large, how do you move forward with that? It again goes back to something I've said before, which is that success in the past isn't always an indicator of future success. Rick Shantz had a lot of success at this club, but there came a time when things fundamentally were not going to work going forward. Now, that doesn't mean that he was a total failure while he was here, but it also doesn't mean that he could realistically remain in the job that he was in. Mm-hmm. I'll also move on now to Sly's comment. I think they're running it like an American sports team. Next home game, we'll see a skydiver drop in with a rising flag. I mean, I won't get into some of the snarkiness overall, because I know that we've seen as well comments about team moving into Vegas lights and all kind of stuff like that, right? And when people see a helicopter land, they kind of think that way. Here's what I think on that, though.
Yeah.
The key thing about this is that if you want to run it like an American sports team, really migrate into that American sports kind of space, you're forgetting a critical part of this. You are in an American sports kind of psyche position, a minor league team in a major league market. You are small time. You are a Division II team. You aren't some huge club that A, can't be usurped, nor are you anything particularly special at that point. And that's then where the question lies, right? Is because if you're not necessarily anything special, what is to stop an NWSL team coming in and displacing you? Not even, let's say, it's not even another men's team. Yeah. A women's team would come in and do that.
Yeah.
If that's your target, that you have to kind of not really create community per se, but to just focus on, I guess, filling seats with people who realistically will probably move on to a different team if one ever showed up.
Right.
Because you will face competition at some point, be it MLS, be it NWSL. You won't remain free of competition in this market forever. This is too big a market. Either you're going to make the jump to MLS, which I think, despite what some people will say within the club, I find by and large less plausible as time goes on.
Sure.
Or you're going to face competition at some point.
Yeah.
How do you set yourself out? How do you try and put up some defense that prevents you from just being swept away?
Yeah.
And what you don't do that by doing is consistently finding ways to alienate elements of your support.
Yeah.
Your hardcore support.
And
who you will rely on if a competitor comes in to keep you going.
And see, that's exactly it. And that's kind of bouncing off of Sly's comment and kind of going back in this kind of full circle to the comment of we are just we're, you know, Owen and I, PHNX Rising, we are the supporter section kind of mouthpiece and everything like that. And, you know, when you hear that, and the way to take it and how you internalize it is, okay, we're propping up that section of the fan base, one that maybe, again, not putting words in people's mouths, but that could be interpreted as being deemed like loud or not the one that the club wishes to amplify. If you look at what the club has done, where you're having these, we've talked about this, right? Even as early on as the promotions and what they've introduced throughout the season, right? Where you're having these things like, look at the helicopter drop, look at Just Entertainment and the different halftime shows, looking at the different food options of, look, this $3 value menu, you win, or we win, you win.
The one that gave Reese intern food poisoning.
Dear gosh.
The poor kid was spent 3 hours on the toilet the day after.
Right.
I had to tell all my friends at Dollar Beer Night, hey, stay away from those hot dogs.
Yes.
Right. I mean, Emma, who's of course no longer here at PHNX, she's off with
she's alive.
She's off with
and
ALLCITY.
well.
Maybe we'll see her in a couple of weeks when we go to Colorado.
She's alive and well.
I'll say the same thing that I say about Hollywood DePaz. Might as well not be. Dead to us.
True. Dang.
Harsh. And she took one bite and spat it out. I mean,
that's a smart move. But
it's a very smart move compared to what Reese did.
Getting back to these different things that the club has done, again, whether it's the in-game entertainment, whether it's the food value menus, whether it's the attractions. Like, again, speaking from perspective where I've worked in a front office for another USL Championship club, I do not fault the front office for trying. There is a caveat. I will not front them for trying. You are looking to bring in new fans. There is a way to make an experience out of it. And I get that. Listen, Phoenix Rising Stadium, there needs work to be done. Okay. I know there you cannot say there are not people who are trying to fill it and they are using different tactics. Okay. I'm not going to fault that because you have to be able to make a living. Yes, I understand that this is a community endeavor. This is not just a club that's for business. It is building community. But at the end of the day, in order to keep running, you need to make revenue. That's a fact. What I think is where some of the issue is there is a disconnect between supporters and the general fan public where Phoenix Rising markets to, and where I think you are trying to bring in a lot of fans, come out to your first match, maybe come to your second. I believe, in my opinion, the goal should be to then try to get people into these supporters. People who
then, what I'll add, and I agree with you.
Sure.
I agree with you that you want to convert those people into long-term supporters, right? And are all the gimmicks necessarily going to really do that?
And I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they are. But
I think one of the other things there is that they haven't even necessarily done as good a job at reaching out to potential football fans in general as they could have.
And that's exactly it. Is I understand you are trying to get people in the door who have not only never experienced a Phoenix Rising match, they may not have ever experienced a football match, maybe outside of their kids playing or something like that. And again, that is all well and good. You need to be able to go to all different types of people. But I think if you are, again, I don't know if this is happening or not, our current supporters being asked, what are your opinions on this? Is there ways that we can help? What can we do in order to help listen to our supporters in order to grow the club? Because if you're looking for community assets and ways to support your club, to grow your club from a Phoenix Rising perspective, why not talk to the people who are already your biggest advocates? I'm not saying this isn't happening, but to me, when you're hearing the statements out there, when you're seeing what the club is trying, there is a part of me that is, okay, you need to try different things. I get where they're coming from, but I also think you're missing the most crucial part is talking directly to the people that many of which feel alienated.
Right, and that's the thing. You're marketing to two very different demographics here, and you're right. You need to fill seats, at least on a temporary basis, right, to get people in. I will add here that the images of the helicopter landing you see make for great marketing material, as the stands at the time look pretty empty. And pretty much every bit of video footage or photograph that you find of the helicopter, it's not really the best advert for the club. But moving on from that, just broadly though, I understand the need to fill those seats, but the problem is that it feels as though they are making a choice on prioritization.
And it's also a
it
lack
feels as
of
though
identity.
it's just about bringing in people who are going to come for a couple of games.
It is.
And not necessarily about also keeping the people who are already here or already open to the idea of coming to games on a regular basis. Maybe our season ticket holders. Look, season ticket holders will always whine. It happens. We know that. That's nothing new.
Of course.
But I just feel as though there is a marked distinction at times over maybe what they're doing now, what they've done in the past, and it doesn't feel quite the same.
And again, like this is you see this at times with teams in general. Like we started off talking about what is this club's identity, and listen, we can give the old Vegas all the crap, and deservedly so. Say what you want, their identity was call it Gimmick FC. And that was something that whether you loved it or hated it, it was their identity. It was clear. Phoenix Rising, to their point, are they trying? Is it promotions? Is it dollar beer night? Is it winning? What is going to be the club's identity? It seems from an outsider's perspective, it seems a bit of trying to figure that out. And which direction do you go in order to not just bring in new people, but the people who are going to be at this club thick and thin, not just if the team is winning, not just if the promotions are good, but be part of the supporters and, those groups who are going to stick with you long after this club, it will always be a thing. And that, I think, is such a hard part to find out. It's not always going to come in a day's work, but that is where I think the goal should lie. And I can't say for certain whether or not that is happening.
Yeah. And again, I think the most important thing you see going forward is that an attitude that has existed in the club, that sometimes continues to exist in the club, I think, of seeing at times almost an us versus them attitude with the supporters.
It's not healthy, man.
It's not healthy.
No.
And the club needs to understand. I mean, it manifests itself in different ways. I mean, again, we keep going back to it. That one comment after the game about
this comes from
coming from senior club management of things
when that is the message that's being delivered by the the higher ranking officials in the club, and that direction of essentially, well, yeah, you're just the mouthpiece for supporters.
That's supporters correspondent. Might as well go cover them celebrating with the fans as well, because you covered everything else they do.
It's alienating. You shouldn't be alienating anyone, but it's alienating the wrong people. Right. It doesn't make any sense. And when that's
you can't reconcile it. You can't reconcile it with the other comments they make as well.
So when that's the direction from the top, man, that's a bad
when fans
look.
Feel like they're not being listened to, and that's the kind of reaction that you have to people who are listening to what the fans are saying. I'm sorry, you're telling the fans who you are. You're telling the fans how you feel about them. And quite frankly, at times I feel as though the fans should tell you straight back to your face exactly what they feel about you in return. And we see that on times. This fan base are not one that will put up with mediocrity. They are not one that has stood back and kind of allowed things to deteriorate at this club without speaking out. And they're not ones to stay quiet in general. And ultimately, that is what the club is being dealt with as a hand. That is the fan base that you have right now. The issue is how you repair that relationship. And again, saying past successes, saying all the things they've done right in the past doesn't necessarily prove that they are equipped now to handle the challenge that they're going to face, which is, again, repairing relationship with a very broken fan base. There are people in this fan base, again, who just the negativity I've seen from people who I don't even know. This isn't just like, oh, it's just a group of bandidos. Okay, we've been around long enough. We know most of the people in the bandidos at this point. There's a lot of people that we just don't know who've got some very, very negative views on the way this club is going and have not stayed quiet about those views. And there's very little to counterbalance that. I think that's the critical thing here, right? When Rick Shantz was being somewhat hounded out by elements of the fan base as things were turning wrong in 2022. And I mean, I'm not saying they were wrong in doing so. The results were poor. I think he'd lost the team. I think things in general had gone wrong to the point whereby to move forward, you had to make a move. However, this time it's not. There was fight back from people who still believed in Rick at the time. I don't see very much of that with everything happening right now that comes from anywhere other than internal within the club. I see people internally in the club doing it, but the point whereby you tell people your ultimately most loyal fans, and broadly again, you're not necessarily siding with most loyal fans over other fans. You're siding with people inside the club over some of your most loyal fans. Is the point whereby you're effectively sticking a finger up to them and telling them that nice for you to have your opinion, but we really don't care. And again, it's an interesting strategy. We'll see how it goes. It obviously doesn't compare well to, I think, certain other clubs in this league that have put much more of an emphasis on community and much more of an emphasis on building those bridges, as opposed to what's felt like effectively here. I mean, a lot of the community engagement I feel lately has felt a lot more like, how does this immediately benefit us? Is it sponsored? Is it something that maybe will sell more tickets on any given night? Now, and I know you pull the face there, Max, because you are, of course, our ad man.
I'm a shill.
But building community is about so much more than that, and it has to be organic. And I don't feel as though the club has a particularly good feel. It doesn't have its fingers on the pulse, I don't think.
Yeah.
Really, of how people feel, or they're choosing to ignore that.
Yeah. Well, I have my fingers on
This has been a very long segment.
I have my fingers on a nice cold Four Peaks pint of beer. Yes, I sure do. Four Peaks, they have their Bad Birdie Juicy Golden Ale. It is very refreshing for when you're talking about the 30,000-foot view of an entire club, past, present, and future. Four Peaks beer, it is a fantastic time for that. The Hop Knot, the Hazy, the Kilt Lifter IPA, the T-Shot, everything like that. Check out Four Peaks. I'm honestly getting parched. It's kind of getting hot in here, and I can use a Four Peaks beer to cool down. Yeah, Damon Dog is nodding along. Yes, check out Four Peaks at their 8th Street Pub, a great venue to get so many delicious beers, cold from the tap. You can follow them as well at Four Peaks Pub and at Four Peaks Brew to keep up with the latest and greatest going on at Arizona's hometown brewery. Find them at a place of business near you at fourpeaks.com. And of course, you must be 21 years or older to enjoy responsibly.
Indeed.
Oh, man. Covered a lot today.
We did.
Boys, it's kind of been a downer of an episode.
After a win, I know we
we
started
just
this with
won.
Victory Monday, but
Yeah, it was a good dub. You know?
you take it.
Fun game,
take
good
it.
dub.
Did you go?
Yeah.
You went. Yeah.
Yeah.
How many
Damon
beers
said
did
he
you
was
get
causing
through?
a stirrup with the
8.
referee.
You got through 8.
Goodness gracious.
Why you weren't a big fan of Mr. Elton Garcia, the referee?
No, I was more so not a big fan of the, I believe it was the east side of the stadium.
that is it.
Sideline referee.
Oh, the assistant referee. Not AR1 then, AR2, not bench side.
Yes.
So not on bench side.
Not bench side.
Okay, 'cause I was gonna
That's
say
kind of where me and my crew were sitting.
from
We were
what I
getting-
gather, the guy on bench side did a master's degree at Cronkite.
Did he really?
Funnily enough, I know.
That's interesting. Well,
This-
non-bench
I
side guy
know.
was hearing it all night long.
Oh, I'm sure.
It was a lot
Sly,
of fun.
we're not talking about Leeds in the chat. We're not talking about Leeds, Sly. Stop.
Great goal
Cease.
too.
Oh, yeah.
From a
good
defender?
goals. Yeah, from Pape, my boy. And again, look, I think that this season, has it been negative overall? There've still been positives that we can take out. I think
Oh,
Pape, my boy, has, for his age,
Stud.
again,
Stud.
does he make mistakes? Of course he does. He's young.
Stud.
He's only just getting into professional football this season. I think he's shown that he belongs as a professional.
He's finally broken
Shown that he belongs.
he's finally broken the deadlock that him and I shared of number of USL Championship goals scored. Good on it. That didn't mean as an insult. That's just
Thank
that's
you,
on me.
Mr. Simpson.
Yes. No.
Here's
yeah.
Max making it about him again.
Oh, here we
As
go.
usual.
Oh,
But the good news
here
is that
we go.
Max isn't going to be here on Wednesday.
Oh wow.
As we're going to be
Bury the lead.
talking through.
Bury the lead.
We're going to be talking through the game coming up on Friday on what
Kick me
Phoenix
out already.
Rising
I've been relegated.
needs to do to get a win against Hartford Athletic and make this 2 wins in a row. Can they do it against a relatively weak Hartford Athletic team? They could do it. They could get this going.
Owen, I'm sure we'll talk about it more on Wednesday, but you pumped to get out to Connecticut?
See, the thing about that is that I'm arriving there at like 2:00 in the afternoon on, the old train. And then I'm back out at like 9:30 the next morning. So actually the vast majority of the time of this trip will be spent in New York City and not in Connecticut.
I'm shocked you didn't want to just kind of vacation out in
Hartford. I mean, it's such a great place, Hartford. Really.
Everyone says Hartford in July. You can't beat it.
I'm sure. I really think that Hartford on a Friday night, I'm sure they got great nightlife in downtown Hartford. I'm really sure they do. And it's not just all offices for insurance companies, which I'm not going to name any particular insurance company because that would make Max a very angry man. But we will talk
Oh my
about
gosh,
the fact that...
Damon, I'm so sorry. This needs to take priority over whatever you're talking about. No. You need this is Damon right here. Damon, do you know that Chelsea and Wrexham are playing on Wednesday?
I did know that, indeed.
Oh, that's nice. Heck yeah. They're playing at Levi Stadium.
It's a friendly
out there?
I was talking about it, and I was saying, like, I don't even know who to root for. Oh, God, it's such a tough one.
It's a friendly, boys.
But Wrexham's been in your blood. Like
biggest club in London versus biggest club in Wales. It's a tough one.
That's crazy. I mean, who's your family rooting for? They've been, growing up as Wales fans.
I mean, yeah, you know my family's big Wrexham.
It's Wrexham, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Chelsea's kind of my own personal escapade, but we bleed Wrexham red for sure.
We do.
These boys are having a great laugh here.
Sometimes you just got to say stuff to make Owen mad. You know, there's not a lot. Yeah. There's not a lot. Usually Owen's doing the poking, so when you can find something to poke him with, you got to get it.
And boy, did we find it. Appreciate him joining us here on the PHNX Rising podcast. Of course, you can follow at PHNX__Rising because double the Wrexham. You can follow me on Twitter at Max David Simpson. You can follow the Oracle on Twitter.
I thought I had a new nickname. I thought it was supporters correspondent.
Oh, well, sorry. Supporters correspondent, the Oracle.
Okay, there we go.
OJ Evans 18. You can follow Damon Dog on Twitter at Damon DAWG. Woo-hoo. I appreciate it. We will be back here on Wednesday, 6 p.m. Set your calendar, set your phones, set your alarms. Make sure to leave a like on your way out. Please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We will read them live. Goodness gracious, man.
We are not going to address the chat
we will
right
not. We love you, chats. You guys are great. It is a beautiful game. It's way more beautiful when, maybe we have a little bit more of an upper instead of such a downer on a Victory Monday. Catch you guys on Wednesday.
We all silly like the mayor.